Jewish-Muslim agreement. We were supposed to have now a special session with the pastor and the imam, a duo who have worked together in Nigeria, but also in Kenya, Chad, and other countries, really with a remarkable peace-building story. And I do recommend to you, there are films about them, several films about the work that they've done, because they were essentially trying to kill each other when they came together and now have been working together to solve conflicts and problems. Unfortunately, James Wuye and Imam Ashafa did not in the end get visas to South Africa, so they are not here. And so we will move directly on to the next session. But I wanted to give you a flavor of how important they are. They've just won some big awards. They're seen as exemplars of this remarkable coming together and working practically for peace.
Thank you, Catherine Marshall. We will now move on to the fifth plenary of the week, which is titled Leave No One Behind, with a focus on vulnerable communities at the center. And would like to call upon Timothy P. Stratford, who's the General Counsel at the G20 Interfaith Forum Association, and Moeletsi Mbeki, who is the Chairman at the South African Institute of International Affairs, as our moderators. Thank you.
The rest of the panelists to come and join us as well.
Where?
Sure. Go ahead, Amanda, please. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this plenary session panel. As was mentioned, our topic is the most vulnerable, and in a way, this is a cross-cutting panel because we're going to focus on how each of the 5 priority areas that we're discussing in this conference especially impact the most vulnerable. Those 5 areas, of course, are food security and poverty, economic and financial action, addressing interreligious tensions through education, and migration and refugee movements, human trafficking and slavery, and finally, disaster prevention, response, and recovery. And I think we all recognize that the most vulnerable in our society are especially impacted by all 5 of these areas. If you think about the vulnerable, you can think about women and children in their own homes or in communities. We can think about refugees. We can think about minority groups. We can think about the unemployed, those who are trafficked. So they're, in some ways, all of us might be put in vulnerable categories. So what we're going to talk about in this panel is we have very distinguished panelists, and that's why the moderators are going to be very shy about speaking too much. And we're going to ask each of them, what have they learned through their own activities about vulnerable groups and how serious this problem is? And what actions can faith communities take to help address this problem? And then ultimately, we hope that we can also discuss the recommendations that our group, IF20, should be making to G20 leaders regarding care for the most vulnerable. So I'd like to turn now to my very distinguished co-moderator, Moeletsi Mbeki, to introduce our first speaker and add whatever insights he would like to add.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session. I was myself a refugee for 28 years, so I fully understand what vulnerable people go through because I went through it myself as a refugee from our apartheid regime in South Africa. Anyhow, unfortunately, our first speaker, Ndidi, had to go home because of some family some family problems. So I'm very sad about this because I had a chat with her on Sunday. She's a very accomplished leader in Africa. She's Nigerian, and she's the founder of Leap Africa, a nonprofit committed to developing dynamic, innovative, and principled African leaders. And that is the one thing we need in Africa, are principled leaders, because we seem to have a shortage of that. However, she has left us with a video, so can our technical people play the video she left behind?
Good afternoon. My name is Ndidi Okonkwo, and I'm the president and CEO of the One Campaign, a global advocacy organization that fights for the investments to ensure economic opportunity and healthier lives in Africa. And our vision is that Africa is an equal player. Now, it's amazing that we're talking about vulnerable populations today, because at the One Campaign, we believe that none of us are equal until all of us are equal, and that where you're born should not determine whether you live. Sadly, our most vulnerable are being neglected and even suffering more than ever before. 3 out of 5 of the poorest people across the world are dealing with crises associated with conflict, climate change, and inequity linked to policies and structural injustice. I want to zero in on 2 particular areas that the vulnerable people are most affected by. One is health outcomes. We're seeing women, children, and the elderly being neglected and forgotten. On the African continent, we're still the region of the world that's dependent on other countries to supplement our health spending. And most of our countries, burdened by debt distress, are having to choose between paying healthcare worker salaries and paying debt. With the recent cuts across the United States and other G7 countries, we're seeing, unfortunately, the closure of hospitals, clinics that provided life-saving medicines and humanitarian support. And this is having a direct impact. As a proud African, I never want to be quoted as saying how many African children are going to die because of cuts. I want to proudly say how many African children will live because of what we collectively do to save lives. And that's why we must continue to fight for life-saving medicines and humanitarian. That's why we must continue to support Gavi and the Global Fund, PEPFAR, and initiatives that have proven a clear return on investment. The faith community was critical at the inception of PEPFAR, when we, as people of faith, came together to demand that our governments invest in saving lives that were being cut short by HIV/AIDS. Now it's time again to raise your voice, people of faith, and ensure that in the face of these cuts, that some of our initiatives that have proven to be worthy of support do not end. That we have a clear pathway to sustainability and a gradual drawdown in partnership with countries about what we must do to continue to save lives. This means that you must hold your governments accountable for how much they're committing to very, very important interventions, such as the Global Fund to fight malaria and TB, and PEPFAR in the United States. Beyond this, we must work with governments on the African continent to ensure a pathway to sustainability. Governments must increase the efficiency and effectiveness of health spending. They must introduce taxes that directly bring in revenue, especially sin taxes and taxes on carbonated soft drinks. The diaspora can fill the gap by contributing to a diaspora health fund or a diaspora health insurance fund for the most vulnerable. We must also support the growth of health economies, creating jobs for our youth in the healthcare sector. And then we must ensure that we transfer the global health infrastructure to Africa, where Africans own the data, the manufacturing, and the procurement to get to the most vulnerable. And finally, we must restructure our debts to pay for healthcare worker salaries. This will directly improve the lives of the most vulnerable. We have to track maternal and infant mortality rates for the most vulnerable, and we have to be ready to take on the needs of these groups. Beyond solving our health crisis and having a pathway to sustainability, we must also address the high cost of capital. African nations must grow, and we must ensure inclusive growth. That means we have to address areas where the most vulnerable work. Agriculture and food, is one of those areas where our farmers are often the poorest. Our farmers have to choose between selling food and eating the food that they produce. Climate change is making their lives even worse. So we have to invest in growing our ag and food sector and ensuring value addition and climate resilience. We must also do the same in critical minerals and ensure fair and transparent value addition for the mines where some of our most vulnerable work. And we must also hold governments accountable, especially governments that are starting to set up these bilateral trading relationships with African governments to ensure equity and justice. Ultimately, we will be measured by what we do for the most vulnerable in our society. God has sent us here as light of the world and salt of the earth. And he is not a micromanager. So he's depending on me and you to use our sphere of influence, people of faith, to demand for equity and justice, to look out for the needs of the most vulnerable, to ensure that policies are implemented for the most vulnerable. Use your faith communities to serve. Open soup kitchens and scale these type of interventions. But beyond the small initiatives that we often do, like soup kitchens or overnight shelters, we must scale ecosystem changes and address the intractable, wicked problems that continue to hold the poor back. And that is addressing conflict, ensuring policies that change lives, but also ensuring equity and justice. I hold all of us accountable to do the same. One of my favorite African proverbs says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. We don't have the luxury of either going fast and far. We must go fast and far together. And to do that, we have to leave our egos and logos at the door, work with integrity and excellence, and design for the most vulnerable. We need faith communities to work with each other, and let's go fast and far together. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think that's a very passionate beginning of our discussion from someone who has made a big difference in some of the programs that she has helped to foster. Our next panelist is Adama Dieng, African Special Envoy for the Prevention of Genocide and Other Mass Atrocities. He's a Senegalese diplomat. He's the African Union Special Envoy for the Prevention of Genocide and Other Mass Atrocities, and he's a fervent advocate for peace, justice, and reconciliation. He's also the Deputy Chair of the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking. He's a former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Special Advisor to Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide. Adama.
Thank you very much, team. I think it's very important to start and adding to this bio my title as Special Advisor of the Muslim Council of Elders. Yeah. This is the reason, in fact, why I am participating in this meeting today. On the issue we are looking for about the most vulnerable, because as a matter of fact, we are all vulnerable, but we will focus on the most vulnerable. Why today are we counting so many people in this continent who are among the most vulnerable? But it's not only about Africa. You go to Asia, you'll find the same. That means something has gone wrong in the way the world leaders are running our world. Because if you go by this book, this is my holy book, the UN Charter. Thanks to this important document, which built multilateralism, we were able to resolve many problems. Haven't we had this problem, I'm afraid we would have been today in a different world. But 2025, what are we seeing? I think we need to see that those attacks against multilateralism, those attacks which made this UN shaking, we need to look into it seriously and see why have we reached that level. And for that, if you want really to address the plight of the most vulnerable, we need to deeply humanize multilateralism. We need to have this multilateralism driven by moral voices, voices capable of inspiring, uniting, and acting. And those voices are the voices of the religious leaders, the voices of the faith-based organization. My involvement in faith organization led me to contribute in the adoption of the plan of action of religious leaders to prevent atrocity crimes, by which I mean genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Yet, we are still facing those problems. And as I've said, we have today 125 million people who are displaced. We have seen them fleeing their homes due to persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violation, and even seriously disturbing public order. And in the face of the refugee crisis, our collective responsibility is immense. I thank you.
Okay. Would you like to ask him another question?
Well, the question really is, what have you learned through your activities about vulnerable groups and how serious you have indicated it's a problem, but how serious is it as a problem? I mean, in Africa, in terms of your own assignment with the African Union, we've had this huge genocide in Rwanda. Are there any other genocides in Africa since the Rwandan occurrence?
Yeah. Well,
That's for you.
For me?
Yes.
There has been, unfortunately, another genocide after the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. This genocide was committed from 2003 in Darfur, Sudan. And I'm so sad to make reference to the Sudan, because what is going on right now, tomorrow, when adjudicated before a court of law, I would not be surprised that the judges say that is what is happening again against the Masalit population is a genocide. And that's why we need to redouble our efforts, and particularly the religious leaders and faith-based organizations. And as a matter of fact, on the Sudan issue, the Muslim Council of Elders is trying to engage with the authorities to see how it can. And at the level of the African Union, I'll be convening a consultative meeting aimed to see how we can contribute to bring peace to Sudan, so that those people who are today really abandoned, I may say, because the focus is on Gaza, the focus is on Ukraine, but very little about Sudan.
Mm-hmm. Right. So would you like to introduce the next panelist?
Should I introduce the next speaker?
Yes,
Well,
please.
sorry, I think I would, I get a bit confused. I thought it was going to be to interact with me.
Yes.
But I simply would say that we can strive for a better world where the concept of no left behind remains elusive. Because I think humanity, for its part, reminds us of our responsibility towards our fellow human beings. It inspires us to show compassion and solidarity. And if you take the interfaith solidarity, it also plays a crucial role in the quest for a better world. And religious leaders have a considerable influence over their communities and do indeed play a key role. And I'm sure my sister Amanda will challenge us on that specific aspect, because we are not only here to address the world leaders, but we may need also to address ourselves as religious leaders, what we can do. And I think it is essential that we consider the plight today of the Sudanese people. We need to see what we can do for those women, those children, the elderly people with disabilities, the refugees, who are often the hardest hit by crisis and inequality. And I think we must ensure that their rights are protected and that they receive adequate support. This requires the implementation of specific programs and raising public awareness of their situation. However, by drawing the values of equity, build the values also of solidarity, of humanity, we can make significant progress. Together, we can build a future where one is not forgotten, when one is forgotten, and where everyone has the opportunity to live in dignity and security. But in this regard, accountability also is key. Above all, prevention is priceless. We must not let it hope die. We have to remain hopeful that things can change. And here, I conclude by thanking once again Catherine Marshall for her continuing struggle. But I will end simply by also paying tribute to one of our sister, Ambassador Aza Baroud, who passed away recently. She was a diplomat, a seasoned diplomat from New York to Brussels, who was engaged with us, with the religious leaders. May her soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I introduce the next panelist? Jose Casanova is a Spanish citizen and a very distinguished gentleman. He's professor of sociology, theology, and religious studies at Georgetown University in the United States. He's currently senior fellow at the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, also at Georgetown University. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. As you can hear, I'm just a scholar that tries to understand the world, and we are not sure. The world is changing so rapidly, and we are going in directions that nobody knows in which directions we are going. Vulnerable communities are vulnerable under ordinary times, but they are especially vulnerable in the extraordinary times in which we are living, where all the global crises we are facing, we are unable to face them seriously together. Our global governance system is failing us. Our national political systems are failing us. Our secular ideologies are failing us. And we are back to the past. Primitive mercantilism, each nation against each nation, or egoist nationalism, nativism, creating walls so that immigrants and refugees cannot enter. And so we are really facing extraordinary times. Said, I am a Spanish citizen. No, actually, I left Spain to study in Germany. So intellectually, you could say I'm a German. I am a citizen of the United States, and I'm married to a Ukrainian. So I understand the crisis of war very seriously also, displaced persons, refugees. And we see that there is no solution to our growing economic inequality. There is no solution to the global ecological crisis. No solution because we are not doing anything as a global humanity. And so the question is, because we are here representing faith communities, at least we have the sense that we don't want to enclose ourselves within our own nations, within our own communities, that we are open to other communities. We want to build bridges. And this is probably the most important thing that we can do as faith communities. Our own working together with one another is the best sign of hope. That we, religious people that were supposed to be irrational, who are fighting with one another, the fact that we can come together and work together toward the common good, this is perhaps in a moment in which the secular ideologies and secular politicians really are not confronting those issues. On the contrary, they are making things worse. Their parties are yelling at each other in parliament, they are polarized, they are simply calling each other names, and they are unable to bring any serious national policies anywhere in the world today, believe me. This happens in Spain, happens in the United States, happens in Germany. And if this happens in these countries, then we can imagine what happens in the rest of the world that is much more vulnerable than these countries. So our task is to be realistic about what we are facing and using our moral sense of community beyond our own communities, bridging towards global humanity to reestablish these bonds that our politicians want to break today. Only love your own, not even love your neighbor, love your own, and you don't need to love the others. This is what some Catholic politicians are saying in Spain, in the United States. So we need the religious leaders to confront these politicians and tell them what really, the kind of ideology they are presenting are not serious, and they are creating very serious problem for us. So again, I think that we need to be realistic. We have very serious problems, and we need to somehow be able to think beyond the box, begin to think collectively as a global humanity, global civil society, beyond the institutions we have, whether it is the economic institutions of Davos, the Davos Consensus. It may have been bad, but the kind of trade system in which we are heading is much worse than the Davos Consensus. The United Nations was a problem, had problems, but certainly to go back to nativism, to nationalism. And Mr. Mbeki has very, very eloquently spoken of the problem of nationalism in South Africa. I could say this is the problem in the entire world today. Nativist nationalisms that are enclosing with each other and cannot really talk to one another or think beyond themselves. So it is our responsibility as people of communities that are able to build bridges beyond our nations and beyond our cultural groups to really both speak up and begin building these common bonds that we need to do to confront the challenges we are having really seriously.
Thank you, Jose. One of the things that really speaks to me as you explain this point of view, on the one hand, you're being very realistic to talk about the problems in the world, but at the same time, you're talking about a way that we can have hope, and that is through the efforts of our faith communities. It's been pointed out that our faith communities extend to virtually every city and every town and every village on this planet. And so we have a connectivity that nobody else has. So the question is, can you give any examples of how faith communities have helped to build these bridges that you're calling for?
Well, again, I don't want to talk of how great the faith communities are. Much of the problems come from faith communities. In Spain, the most xenophobic party is the so-called Catholic Party. In the United States, we have a lot of Catholic leaders, politicians and judges who have forgotten the Catholic social teachings. So again, we have to be realistic also, understanding the problems of the faith communities also. But within the faith communities, there are these prophetic voices that are able to transcend their own interest as a community. I mean, I could even say about Ukraine, a country which is really has been, again, for those of you who come from the global south, you have to think of Ukraine as a colony within Europe. It was colonized for centuries. Their language was not recognized. Still, people say the Ukrainian language doesn't exist. The Ukrainian people do not exist. Well, tell me, they do exist, but that's what colonizers always say of the colonized. The point is, in a country that is a majority Orthodox, has a community of churches and religious organizations that includes all the Christian groups and Muslims and Jews, and they work together. They have the chair of the group. There's a pass-on from group to group, so every group chairs the community or the association for 6 months, and they work together not to represent their own interests, but the common good. Before the war, they were involved in helping civil society, and today, in the midst of war, they are trying to do the best they can do to help the displaced, the refugees within the country, to build solidarity. So the point is, even in the worst conditions, if faith communities can work together with one another, because the problem is when you have a hegemonic religious community tied to the nation and nationalism, then you are in trouble. And this is the problem that we have with Russian Orthodox nationalism. But when you have all the religious groups, think, Ukraine, the president is a Jew, the Minister of Defense is a Muslim. It would be unthinkable in any other European country to have a Jewish president and a Muslim Minister of Defense. And yet it's happening there, in the midst of war. And so this is, to a certain extent, even there, when you have faith communities coming to work together beyond their own interests as a faith community, then there is hope.
Thank you very much. That's an encouraging example. I'd like to turn now to Kevin Hyland. He was the first UK anti-slavery commissioner. This was a role that gave him authority over most government institutions, including the police, health, local governments, immigration, and health services. He was a police officer for 30 years, dealing with serious crime. He's received many awards for his policing and humanitarian efforts, including being appointed an officer of the British Empire by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So can we turn to you, Kevin? You've had, there you are. You've had a lot of experience working with the vulnerable. What have you come to understand about this problem?
Yes, thank you, Tim. I want to start by talking about who the vulnerable are in the world that I'm referring to. And it's the Eritrean girl who was 15 years of age who I met in Italy, who was sold 20 times a day when she was in Libya at a connection house, sold for sex, sold for work, until she could get in a dangerous vessel to cross the Mediterranean. Or the Indian woman who came to the UK on the hope of working and finding a great job. She was kept under the sink only to be brought out to be raped or to clean the house, and sold 3 times amongst wealthy millionaires. Or the Thai girl who came to the UK from Bangkok to study English, but then she ended up caught in a premises in East London, just waiting for the next man who came along. At the age of 17, she was having sex, forced sex, with about 15 men a day. Or the Nigerian woman who I met, who came to the UK and then to France and then shared around Europe, had no rights, no freedom. She was just bought and sold. Or the thousands of men who are working in the fishing industry or agriculture or other industries who go for jobs but then are exploited, salaries stolen, kept in poor conditions, to build premises like the Olympics, the sporting events that are going to happen in the US, or the other events around the world, or some of the most wealthy businesses where they work and are exploited, all for profit, or the children whose organs are taken from them so that wealthy people can have organs. Both will die. The children will die very young and have a poor, short life after the operation. So what is about those people? Those people move because of their vulnerability, or they are somewhere where they are vulnerable. But when they move to where there is safety or a job or an opportunity, that's when the trafficking, the modern slavery begins. So their vulnerability is created. It's actually a vulnerability that's created, and very often by the wealthy, or by businesses, or by governments, or by us, the consumers. And that is 50 million people across the world who are exploited like this. But those who find any form of justice is 5 in every 47,000. So 5 people in the Yankee Stadium in New York would seek justice. And this generates $236 billion every year for criminals. So that is what I see. But what I do see, and I'm very clear on, is that because this is an actual human-made vulnerability and exploitation, we have got a chance to solve it. We have got a chance for the interventions. And here at the G20, and with the Interfaith Forum and Pravani Global, we are calling on 30 by 30, which is a mission to end this suffering, so that governments are funding this mission properly. At the moment, globally, there is less than $1 million spent on human trafficking and modern slavery and its prevention. We want to see 30 billion every year by 2030. And we have here a call to action which will be distributed and will be available on the website of the IF20 so that you can see what we think is needed, so that the girl in Eritrea, the woman from India, the woman from Thailand, the women from Nigeria, and those men and those children have equality and have the right to life that we take for granted. Thank you.
But Kevin, what we're seeing now, you're calling for more money to be devoted to addressing the problems that you've mentioned, and I agree with you. But what we are actually seeing is that the donor countries are spending more and more money on defense and less money on meeting the needs of disadvantaged populations. The United Kingdom government, for example, I think announced recently that it is reducing its foreign aid program from 0.7% of GDP down to 0.3% of GDP because it's buying arms, it's increasing defense spending. We're seeing the same thing in the United States. We're seeing the same thing throughout Western Europe. How do you see this defense spending, this huge escalation in defense spending by the donor countries?
Yes, and as we know, aid budgets have been cut across the globe, which is a serious challenge. But what we are doing, and you will see on our call to action, there is 236 billion that is stolen from people, and it's criminal asset. And we are talking about how we start to tackle that, to give that money back. We are not talking about creating more money. We're talking about identifying where money is. And that is something that even the US government currently is very interested in. How can we start to identify that? Also, these workers that travel, the millions of workers for migrants who travel, the global amount of money that goes in remittances is 870 billion every year. And a significant percentage of that is stolen or taken away through human trafficking or modern slavery, through debt bondage, through extortion of wages, and so on. If we start protecting that money, it will mean that there could be more money going back to families for remittances than the whole global economy the OECD countries give on global aid in the history of when it was 0.7. I live in Ireland. I'm from Ireland originally. In Ireland, the country was built on remittances. It's now a booming economy. Remittances can make a difference. When people travel and they get a job, they want that money to go back to their families. We need to be securing that. We need to look at things about prevention. And aid budgets are important, but we need to look at new ways of doing things. And remember, we're here to talk to the G20, to give the G20 leaders ideas. The things that they talk about is economy and percentages and stakeholders in money and things like that. Well, of course, too much profit goes to a small amount of the world. But there is a way of getting what people have earned back to them and to start taking away the asset that criminals are earning, whether that criminal is an individual, an organised gang, or a big multinational company. And that's what we need to start targeting. So it's not about there being more money given. It's about where we find their money, take it from them, and start to put it back into the economy of looking after the vulnerable and the people who deserve that money.
Okay, thank you. I think that's really good.
Do I introduce Amanda?
Yeah.
Okay. I seem to have lost Amanda. Where are you?
I'm here.
Okay. I lost you in the
okay.
papers.
It's okay. It's actually all right if you don't read my bio. Amanda from the village is just perfect.
I think it's also very
Okay.
interesting where you have come from the village. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Actually, before you start counting my minutes, I just want to say that I do dream of a time when the only introduction necessary is our first names. But there you go.
Sorry about that.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I've been listening attentively, and I would like to zero in on 3 groups of vulnerable people that I just want to sort of bring into the room. 2 specifically in Africa and 1 out of Africa. And the first one is really a sort of come with me, if you can, mentally, to Mohale's Hook, one of the 10 districts in Lesotho. And what you're going to find there is women, men, young people working to rehabilitate the land that has been destroyed over the last 50 years, okay? Either through deforestation, overgrazing, and just the elements of climate change. It's impacting on their ability to grow their own food, to be food self-sufficient and secure. And they're also working on the restoration of the wetlands to safeguard their water. What I want to say about these people is that they're challenged in terms of access to education, access to health, access to technology, access to infrastructure. In fact, despite the fact that there is a lot of water that flows through their land, they actually struggle in terms of access to clean water and sanitation. The basic things that we all take for granted. And yet, what I saw and what you will see if you come with me mentally to Mohale's Hook is women of faith. I don't understand how they continue to trust, to have faith. And even when, as different organizations we visit, we go there, we ask to take photographs, we talk about supporting them, we go away and don't come back for another 2 years to take more photographs, they still believe that somehow there is something about Ubuntu that can touch their lives and make a difference. One thing that I've learned from that, the other thing that I've learned from that group that I want to throw into our conversation, when big economic projects are being invested in by government, by private sector, these communities give up their land. They give up their natural assets. And yet, I am yet to see their reward in terms of not compensation, but in terms of equitable benefit of the development dividends that come out of these macroeconomic projects that are being implemented. That's one group. My second group is women and young people. And I want you to, again, if you can, come with me to the 25th of November, 2022. It's the beginning, the launch of the 16 days of activism. I'm sitting with a group of government officials, ministers, faith organizations, civil society, private sector, and we're listening to a 15-year-old girl. And she's asked the question, what message do you have for your peers. She has a child, a son, and what she has said is there are times when she calls this boy her son, and there are times when she knows that this boy is her brother. Okay? So her message to her peers is, don't trust your parents, don't trust faith leaders, don't trust your teachers, because they do this to us. The last group of people that I would like to take you to in terms of vulnerabilities outside of the African continent are people of color. You can call them whatever you want. You can say you're brown, you're black. It's okay. I'm calling them people of color. That regardless of where you go, in Western Europe, in North America, as long as you are a person of color, you are sitting most likely at the bottom of the food chain. This is not an accident. So when we are talking about vulnerable people, that's what I would like you to have in mind. That they come in all forms, shapes, and sizes. And I would like to say that I used to work for Christian Aid. And one thing that Christian Aid gave me was the confidence to talk about power and poverty, and that actually it is a spiritual imperative for every believer to challenge the powers that be and the hardwiring of systems that continuously remove the dignity of human beings. And for as long as we don't do that, we are failing not just our brothers and sisters, but we are failing the vertical relationship that we have with God. Whatever your belief system is, but we are failing to actually do what He wants us to do. Shall I stop there for a second? You have another question for me.
Well, I just wanted to ask, you've seen a lot of failings, you've seen a lot of suffering. You were CEO of Christian Aid. What have you seen that people can do that is truly helpful? Everyone in this room wants to be helpful. I think that's why they're at the conference. So what can we do that would truly be helpful?
Okay, that's fair. I think that's a fair question. And it's also right to say that all of us here want to make a difference, right? And our ability and capacity to make a difference is determined by our understanding of the issues, right? And there have been examples. I think the video, I can't remember her name, Ndidi. She talked about PEPFAR and the role that faith institutions and organizations actually contributed to that. The Jubilee Debt campaign, that was really driven from people of faith, believing and working together, not working in silos, not looking for individual accolades, but putting aside everything else and saying, we need this and we need a change. So there are things that we can do. The other thing that I believe that faith-based organizations have been really good at, or they used to be very good at it, is hospitals, schools, clinics. In the most remote of areas, what you would find is a Seventh-day Adventist hospital. You would find a Catholic school. You would find, and it educated so many people. What can we do better? I think that's the question that I would like us to sort of really think about. It's somehow, and please forgive me, this is my personal view, okay? Somehow, along the way, we have been compromised. The lines between people of faith and politicians is very blurred, right? In some instances, we have colluded with a system that legitimizes the oppression of vulnerable people, right? And we need, personally, what I would like to see is we need to walk the talk. we need to, there is one thing that nobody else can do. Not politicians, not private sector, nobody else except religious organizations and people of faith. And that is to restore the spiritual dignity of human beings, because that is what makes us unique and different. And I think we can bring that to the table. Last, but not the least, what I want to say is when you look at the sort of current socio-economic and environmental context that we're working in, every single person that have spoken, or many people that have spoken over the last 3 days, has acknowledged that there's something that is broken, okay? The economy is broken. Politics is broken. The environment is broken. But the thing that breaks our heart is that we are broken. We are broken. And before we can go and say to the G20, you need a Marshall Plan for least developed countries, put enough resources to build the infrastructure that is needed, to ensure that health systems provide for the most. Do you know what maternal mortality levels are in this country? In Lesotho, it's 533 deaths in every 100,000 live births, right? We're talking about serious numbers. So what we need to do is, in here, please, I plead with you, as people of faith, let's be honest with each other. Let's talk to one another. It's not about who is right, who is wrong, but it's about facing the brokenness. Then we can start healing. Then we can talk to the G20 and say, this is what we want you to do. We can ask, we've got followers, we've got people who come to churches, to mosques, synagogues, name it. If the faith leader says this is where we stand, then those people are going to listen. And that's my call to action. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think Africa has the least productive agriculture. Is there anything, Amanda, what do you think should be done to address the productivity of agriculture in Africa? Okay. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about the whole world, but if we are not prepared to reorganize our productive system, then especially women are going to continue to be vulnerable because they bear the brunt of the low productivity in the agricultural sector. What should we be doing in Africa to address this problem of reorganizing our agricultural systems?
Thank you. You know, I suspect that if I had a perfect answer for that one, I would probably be very, very rich, right? But there is the interconnectedness between Africa's natural resources. Land as an asset, water as an asset, and mineral resources as an asset. Land is being impacted by two different things. One, I think I've already mentioned in terms of issues of climate change, issues of deforestation, overgrazing, and so on. In some countries, we're losing about 2% of topsoil annually because of that, right? Which means that it compromises the fertility of the land. Number two, when you go to rural communities, in some of the African countries, almost between 60 and 70% of people live in rural areas. When you go to those areas, go back, and now I'm going to show my age, but go back a few decades, and I recall that my grandparents would plant, would harvest, and 10% of what they harvested would be given to the community. Another percentage would be put for the next season in terms of preservation, and then the other they would eat or sell. These days, you go to small-scale farmers, the seed that they have can no longer be replanted because it has been modified chemically, genetically, and they're now perpetually dependent on having to buy seed every single planting season, right? Even if they serve their seed, they're not able to. Okay, so the other thing is some other land that they have that is fertile might be the land where actually you have the minerals. And when you have minerals, we have DRC. Nobody has mentioned DRC. We have DRC that's happening right now. Why? Because of the minerals that they have, right? So what you get is displacement. What you get is fertile land actually being used for something else. Now, if it was used for something else, there was peace and people benefited from it, that would be okay, but they're not. So to answer your question, Ndidi, Moeletsi, is let's do three things. Let's go to where the rural communities are. Let's make sure that we invest in mini grids so that they have energy, so that they can do irrigation, so that at the very least, they can be empowered and capacitated to produce food for themselves in the first instance. Let's look at nutrition. It's not just a question of planting more maize. What is it that we are talking about malnutrition in very high figures. The level of malnutrition in a place like Angola is over 2 million people, right? So how do we make sure we energy, water, and nutritional farming, right? Let's take development to the communities. Let's not expect the communities to come to the cities for purposes of development. That's where I would go. I know that I haven't really answered the question, but finally, really, it's about, and I struggle with this. Working for the UN, the thing that I love the most is that it's a multilateral system that brings everybody together, okay? What I would like to see more is faith-based organizations at that level. Please, don't come in silos, because the transaction burden is on the community, not on you. Because you take the pictures, you go and tell your church that you did well, you go to your donors, they give you money, but that same woman has to respond to you, to you, to you, to you, and to me, right? So let's try to do something that is different. And then last but not least, it's the money. Let's not give $5,000 and go and shout that we gave $5,000 when the only thing that $5,000 is going to do is feed them for this year. Let's talk about $500 million to invest in the infrastructure that is required, that is going to be sustainable, that's going to be left there. That's where I would go with the conversation.
Thank you very much. I think our last panelist is Elder Vai Sikahima. He's actually a former professional American football player. He was quite a star, All-American pro. He was the one you kick the ball and he would catch it and he would beat everybody and run for a touchdown. And so we're hoping that he can help us make a few touchdowns in our discussion today. He was assigned to be a General Authority 70 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2021, and he's been in Africa now, in the Africa South area for about a year. So basically, we've set the stage for you. We've talked about the challenges. Certainly Amanda has talked about challenges here. So you've been here for a year or so. What have you learned about the vulnerabilities in Africa? And I'll really put you on the spot. What has the church that you represent done to try to address these vulnerabilities?
Thank you, Tim. First of all, no statement from me. I yield my time back to the panel. As a former NFL player, I am the least accomplished on this panel, so I have nothing important to say. But I appreciate the fact that I'm on this panel, and I will try to make some contribution. Relative to my faith and to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we're motivated by one simple thing in helping the most vulnerable. And it's found in Matthew chapter 22. To love God and to love our neighbor. That's the two great commandments, and it's what motivates us in all that we do. I'm an immigrant to the United States with my family. We immigrated when I was 7 years old from the small South Pacific island of Tonga. My parents were uneducated. My mother was a seamstress. My father was a security guard. But I'll share something with you that I learned in the process of immigration and being the most vulnerable in our community. And it's what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints blessed us with. Our church impressed upon us that we were to, thank you. The church impressed upon my parents that we were to contribute to our own self-reliance. Even as little money as they made, the church asked us to pay tithes. From the book of Malachi, God taught this to the ancient Israelites. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will not pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room to hold it. Because we received food orders from my family from the bishop's storehouse, my parents insisted that we kids go every Saturday to the bishop's storehouse and work and clean and stock shelves and sweep and mop. You know what that did for us? It gave us dignity.
Yes.
It taught us as children that we were to work for whatever it was that we were reliant someday, unlike their circumstances. You might be interested in this. We are staying at a Marriott hotel. You may or may not know that the Marriotts are very prominent Latter-day Saints. The Marriotts pay the same amount of tithing that we pay, 10% of their increase. Now, I think they have a little bit more tithing that they give to the church than we do. But it's the same percentage. And in that process, we are all blessed through this process. I got my two African brothers and their wives, Isaac Morrison and Yinka Ajitaran. Please stand up. I just want you to acknowledge them. And your wives, your beautiful African wives. Look at them. They'll get me in trouble later. All of us have been blessed by the same process, by the same commitment to live our faith, to give of our best when we're asked, and to pay tithes and offerings that not only bless others, but it blesses us. It blesses us. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to embarrass you.
I don't know anything about it.
Thank you very much. I think we've just barely begun. We have a few more minutes, and what I'd like to do now is ask the panelists who have heard one another to just take a couple of minutes and share with us their conclusions and their recommendations. You know, the purpose of this gathering is to solicit ideas so that the IF20 can contribute recommendations to the G20 leadership. And we've all had a chance to think about these issues a little bit. I wonder if we could start again with Adama, and if you could, if you had a chance to talk to the G20 leaders now, if they were seated in this room, what are the recommendations that you would give to them on behalf of the interfaith communities? And I think we can ask all the panelists to try to answer the same question.
I would first and foremost say to them, let us live in peace. I would tell them, for those coming from the West, bring back what you have taken from our soil. Because that is a great son of Africa from this country, Mbeki, who in one of his reports made it very clear. What Africa needs today is a renaissance. And that renaissance is possible if Africans themselves stop stealing the money of their people and sending them in Western barracks. We have witnessed in recent years change of government in part of this continent, particularly where I come from in West Africa, the Sahel region. We thought that it was the end of the military coup, but we witnessed military coup. Why? Because government after government, corruption destroys everything. How can you go in a poor country and see people driving Rolls-Royce in this continent? That is an insult to all of us. So time has come, I think, for the African leaders to take seriously their responsibility, to be united. Kwame Nkrumah made it very clear. Nwuneli made it very clear. Those I call the founding father of the African Union today, CO, which was the Organization of the African Unity, most of them didn't have a penny in a bank. I remember my last meeting with Nwuneli that was in Geneva. He was chairing the South-South Corporation. He was telling to me, he was discussing about our good friend Kenneth Kaunda. He said, Adama, can you believe? Kaunda, he even didn't have a house. He thought State House was his private house. So when he left power. He, Mwalimu, went in to meet the colleagues in the region, heads of state, raising funds to build a house for our brother, Kenneth Kaunda. But today, you have recent heads of state in Africa who have built the palaces costing billions. Where comes from that money? So we have to pay more attention and implement those resolutions we have taken. Africa has adopted an African Convention to fight corruption. We have, as I said, the most beautiful architecture of peace and security. We have launched what is called silencing the guns. But where are we? Many conflicts going on. And who's benefiting from those conflicts? Foreign powers. You kicked out those French, those British, you welcome the Russian, the Chinese, etc. And Africa remains that beggar sitting in a golden of mine. We don't need aid. And I will conclude simply by saying we don't need aid by quoting Nelson Mandela. He said on justice, overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. No. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and decent life. And on solidarity, Mandela went on and said, and he was very clear, let there be justice for all. Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Word, bread, water, and salt for all. Let us know that for each, the body, the mind, and the soul have been free to fulfill themselves. End of quote. And that is what we need today. We need to redouble efforts. We need to strengthen African unity. I don't know who was referring to the people of color. I don't like that formula, but that is a reality. Today, you go in many places, racism is still valid. You are a black, you are perceived as such. We have to fight those. We have to be more open. Catherine was saying one of our colleagues was not able to come. I mean, thank God I managed finally to enter this country because it was very difficult. I was asked to produce the death certificate of my dad, of my mom. Wow. I couldn't have it. Those procedures should be changed. We should do like some of those countries, Rwanda, Benin, and recently Kenya followed the example to say any African who entered this country, you don't need a visa, you'll be given the visa when you enter the place. We know there are difficulties, but we have to build the African unity. If we build African unity, we will no longer need any power outside. We can feed all the African with the resources we have. But that means also good governance. We have to stop stealing. We have to have independent judiciaries. We have to really care about our people. One day, if we do it, we will no longer have the world even most vulnerable.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Can we turn now to Jose to give your perspective as we've heard these comments?
I think...
Yeah, it's on.
Yes, I think we have to be humble. I would go to the G20 and ask them, how can we help? We need to work together towards common goals, and let's do it. And we won't do it unless we recognize each other. The problem of mutual recognition of all human groups, of all peoples, of all cultures, is the fundamental problem we have today. We have advanced very much. I come from a church, the Catholic Church, that once upon a time thought was the only true church in the world, and everybody else had names. They were schismatics, they were heretics, they were infidels, they were pagans. Now, they said, let's recognize each other. And the Catholic Church has passed from being an exclusivist religious community to being one of the most involved in interreligious dialogue with all other religious groups. There is something that has happened at the level of the world religions that is unique. We are in the process of mutual recognition in a way that many other political groups, ideological groups, social groups are not doing. And so what we have to bring is the message of mutual recognition. It's the fundamental problem, whether in Gaza, in Palestine, in Israel, in Ukraine, in Russia, mutual recognition. And unless we begin this process of all of us as humans recognizing each other both as diverse and equal. This is what is unique about the religious groups. Each religion claims to be unique, particular, different, and has the right to be unique and different, and yet claiming to be somehow also a religion for all of humanity. So we have to learn how to treat each other as equal and yet recognize our fundamental diversity and differences. If we do that at all levels, because the G20 is falling apart also. They do not recognize each other. They have a lot of talk, but let's look. Let's see what happens. Look at the G20. Look at the 20 and how do they work together with one another. They don't work together with one another. So we have to start from the very beginning again, of mutual recognition and of working together toward our common problems.
Thank you. I think that since religious communities are sometimes blamed for contention in the world, that if we can show that we get along well, then that could be a very powerful influence. Kevin, can we turn to you?
Yes, thank you. If I had the 20 world leaders in front of me, and obviously all the countries so tied into that, the first thing I would be asking them, do they feel the shame that I feel as the current incumbents on this world of the situation in the world? Do they feel that shame that we have allowed it to get to where we are? But then do they feel the pride with the good people that are there? I have the privilege of going around and working with religious sisters in the UK, but also in Africa, in Asia, and particularly religious sisters, but all sorts of religious people who are doing incredible things, with almost no resources sometimes. But they keep going. And they keep going against adversity, never giving up, using their faith as their food, as their encouragement. And I think if global leaders, many of them talk about their faith, many of them talk about faith being important, but if they started to see and understand what faith is, what being, as Pope Francis called, a person of goodwill, if they could really see what that was and how they could be the makers of that, how they could be the deal breakers of that, but they have to push their egos out. They have to start looking at people as individual humans and not as commodities or ways of earning money. One of the things we talk about a lot, particularly us who live in the Western world, is about keeping migrants out. I hear it all the time. But we want all your riches. We want all your minerals. We want all your wealth. We don't want your people. That is a real shame on our world. And we need to change that. And the only people, as we've heard from Jose on this panel, who can really drive that and can never give up is people of faith. And when I look at, I was in India last year with religious sisters and went out and raised money for them so they could keep doing their job. Somewhere where nearby churches were being burnt down, they couldn't walk safely around. But they said to me, never give up your bit, Kevin. Make sure you keep us with money coming. And I said, well, never give up your bit. If we work together, though we might be thousands of miles apart, we can make a difference to lives of young women and girls. And I would say to faith leaders, what part of that game are you playing? Because many of you are on a different game, a different field, acting in a completely different way. And I would like to see them feeling humility, starting to accept and acknowledge the shame that they are imposing on our world, and start to work, but listening to people like us and groups like this. So that's what I would say to them.
Thank you very much. Amanda, please.
Thank you. I would have one message for the G20 that I would hope we can take collectively to them, and then one message for ourselves. The message for the G20, I truly believe that they need a Marshall Plan for Africa. If we do the debt relief or debt restructuring, if we sort out tax in terms of tax justice, if we sort out and meet our promises on climate finance, if we have better and more fairer trade practices, and if we address the issue that my brother was talking about in terms of the illicit financial flows, not just external, but internal, all that saves us money that can be put to better use for Africa. And I think that the G20 at this time needs to take that bold decision to put money, not a little bit of money, not just enough money, but money that is going to transform vulnerabilities into strengths. A message for all of us, and I'm going to put myself as part of that, as people of faith, is, first of all, I want to say be bold, be brave, but don't be reckless. We are dealing with political and geopolitics in the world, but really the fantastic message that I have for you that gives me hope is Micah 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good and what God would want you to do. To act justly. Justice, justice, justice. There can be no freedom without justice. To love mercy. Make your hospitals the best hospitals in the world. Make your schools the model of education that is equitable. Make your projects the beacon of hope that everybody else can look to and say, we want to model our projects after them. And last but not least, walk humbly with your Lord, because that is what is going to open the gates of compassion and dignity for everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing certainly what is one of my favorite scriptures in Micah. And I think that because God has called us to do this, if we listen softly to our hearts, we'll each have a call of action of what he would like us to do to carry out that injunction. Can I turn to Elder Sikahima now for your thoughts?
I know we're out of time, but 30 seconds, I can do this. Here's what you do while you're here. Exchange business cards with each other. Build coalitions, build partnerships, look for people that have projects that are similar to yours or you think can help you. That's why we're all here together, so that we can build friends, make friends, build coalitions, partnerships, and let's go bless the world. Love you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
As Catherine Marshall reminds us, the IF20 is a network of networks. And if you talk about everybody in this room and the networks that we're connected with, you're talking about many thousands, in fact, millions of people. And so we shouldn't underestimate the ability of us to go out of this room and to make a difference. I'd like to ask Moeletsi to give us some closing thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Well, I want to address just two issues. First, the Africans here amongst us. The faith communities in Africa are very powerful, and they are very important. And our own experience in South Africa with the faith communities, without the faith communities, we would never have been able to get rid of apartheid. And what gets forgotten is that the apartheid regime had nuclear weapons. But the role that the faith communities played, we were able to get rid of apartheid. So I have to appeal to the faith communities in Africa that they have to play a more pronounced political role. We have to change the politics of Africa so that they are oriented towards promoting the development of the community, the development that benefits the majority of the African people, and reduce, if not eliminated, the vulnerabilities that we live under. That is one part. The second part I want to address to the Western countries. The Western countries and the Western faith communities are also very powerful. Right now, today, all of us in the world, are faced with the problem of the United States. The United States was built by Africans, and it was built by Europeans, and it was built by Native Americans. We are seeing the United States withdrawing from its obligations about the development of the rest of the world. I have to appeal to the communities, the faith-based communities in the Western countries who have influence over the Republicans and who have influence over President Trump, to remind him about the United States' obligations towards the rest of the world. Thank you very much, Pete.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to our MCs to talk about what comes next.
Thank you.
I think that panel deserves a proper round of applause. That was some of the most robust and honest conversations that we have to have with ourselves as faith leaders in this room. I have no words, and personally I am inspired, and I want to tie it up with what Steve Biko said in his book, I Write What I Like, when he was urging us that it is up to us to give the world a human face. And I will leave you with that words. We're going to go into a tea break from now until 4:30? No, not 4:30. Yeah, 3:45. Good. So from now till 3:45, we're having a tea break. And then breakout room 1, which will be talking about refugees, migrant, and internally displaced people, will be on this side. And then the second breakout room, a historical reflection, the book about the G20 Interfaith experience, will be that side. So if you want a more updated program of the day, please scan your QR codes on your name tags, all right? Judith has more.
Once again, a reminder to those who are traveling today or tomorrow, please go to the registration desk to inquire about transport and travel time. Unfortunately, I do have some bad news, but some good news as well. We will not be providing dinner this evening. However, this gives you all a chance to recharge and rest because we have to gather here tomorrow morning at 8:30. So please use this time to arrange your own meals, rest, recharge, and then we'll meet again tomorrow. Please do enjoy the breakout sessions.